Their tiny hands were trembling as they clutched at the stranger's jacket. Tears carved identical paths down their identical faces, their voices breaking in perfect harmony. "Please, sir. They're hurting our mother." The elegant dining room froze. Wine glasses stopped mid-pour. Every conversation died mid-sentence. Every head turned. But the man these twin girls had chosen to beg wasn't just any stranger. He was Salvatore Leone, the most feared mafia boss in all of Chicago. And what he did next would become a legend that no one in that room could ever forget. Stay with me until the end, because this story will leave you speechless. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now, let's get into it. It's a cold Friday evening in downtown Chicago, 1989. The Onyx Room hummed with the usual atmosphere of controlled danger, well-dressed men conducting business over aged whiskey and conversations spoken just above a whisper. This wasn't just any restaurant. This was Salvatore Leone's domain. Every waiter knew to move like ghosts and hear nothing. Every patron understood the unspoken hierarchy. You showed respect. You minded your business. And you never, ever disrupted the peace. Salvatore Leone sat at his regular corner booth, an imposing figure whose mere presence commanded both reverence and terror in equal measure. At 51, he had built an empire that controlled half the city's underworld. His dark eyes, framed by slicked-back hair and a perfectly trimmed beard, missed absolutely nothing. His word was absolute law. And tonight, like every Friday evening for the past decade, he was conducting his weekly meeting with his most trusted lieutenants. The conversation flowed in hushed, efficient tones. Money was counted. Territories were negotiated. Problems were addressed with surgical precision. The atmosphere was one of expensive cologne, Italian leather, and the kind of quiet power that comes before storms. This was Sal's world, controlled, predictable, utterly under his command. But in exactly 3 minutes, 2 desperate little girls in matching yellow dresses would shatter that control forever. The crystal chandeliers cast amber light across white tablecloths as waiters moved between tables like shadows, their footsteps muffled by Persian rugs that cost more than most people earned in a year. The Onyx Room didn't advertise. It didn't need to. If you knew about it, you belonged. If you didn't, you stayed away. Salvatore Leone occupied the corner booth like a king on his throne, his back to the wall, eyes on every entrance. The subtle tattoo on his neck, a black rose, barely visible above his crisp white collar, was the only hint of the violence that had built his empire. His dark suit was Italian, custom-tailored to accommodate the broad shoulders that had broken men twice his size. Gold glinted at his wrist and neck, but nothing ostentatious. Sal didn't need flash. His presence was enough. To his left sat Luca Marchetti, his consigliere for 15 years. Silver-haired and sharp-eyed, Luca handled the numbers, the negotiations, the careful legal maneuvering that kept their operation untouchable. He was speaking now in low tones about a shipping contract, his words precise as a surgeon's scalpel. Across from Sal, Dante Romano leaned back with the coiled tension of a man who solved problems with his fists. Scars decorated his knuckles like medals. He was Sal's enforcer, the one who reminded people what happened when they forgot the rules. Tonight he nursed a scotch and listened, his dark eyes scanning the room with the vigilance of a guard dog. Rocco Battaglia sat to Sal's right, a mountain of muscle poured into an expensive suit that strained across his chest. Where Dante was precision violence, Rocco was overwhelming force. Men crossed the street when they saw him coming. But here, in Sal's presence, even Rocco was just another lieutenant awaiting orders. The waterfront situation? Sal's voice was quiet, but everyone at the table leaned in. He never raised his voice. He never had to. Handled, Dante replied. They'll pay on time from now on. Sal nodded once. Efficient. Clean. That was how he operated. 25 years he'd survived in a business where most men didn't make it past 5. He'd done it by following one unbreakable rule: never let anyone close enough to be used against you. Attachment was vulnerability. Vulnerability got you killed. He learned that lesson the hard way, in blood and grief that had nearly destroyed him. So he'd rebuilt himself into something harder. Something untouchable. He had money, power, respect bought with fear. He had an empire that stretched across half the city. What he didn't have, what he deliberately cut out of himself like a cancer, was weakness. The restaurant hummed with quiet conversations. Deals being made. Alliances being formed. This was Sal's world, ordered and controlled, predictable as clockwork. He lifted his wine glass, about to speak, when the heavy oak doors at the entrance burst open with a crash that shattered the careful peace like a hammer through glass. Every head turned. Every conversation stopped. And Sal's dark eyes fixed on the doorway where two small figures stood silhouetted against the Chicago night, trembling and desperate and completely, impossibly out of place in his perfectly controlled domain. Two identical little girls burst through the doorway, their matching yellow dresses bright as sunlight against the restaurant's dark elegance. They couldn't have been more than 6 years old. Their light brown hair hung in tangled knots around faces streaked with something pink, face paint, maybe from some children's party, now running in rivers down their cheeks with their tears. They held hands so tightly their knuckles had gone white, moving together like two halves of the same desperate soul. The maitre d' rushed forward, his face going pale with panic. "Signorine, you cannot." But the girls didn't stop. Didn't even slow down. Their bright blue eyes swept across the restaurant with the frantic desperation of drowning children searching for something, anything to grab onto. Past the shocked diners frozen with forks halfway to their mouths. Past the waiters who'd stopped mid-step, trays balanced precariously. Past men in expensive suits whose hands had instinctively moved toward jacket pockets, where other kinds of problems were usually solved. And then their eyes found Sal. Something passed between them in that moment, some childlike instinct that recognized power when it saw it. Maybe it was the way every man in the room had unconsciously oriented himself toward Sal's booth. Maybe it was the expensive suit or the gold that caught the chandelier light. Or maybe it was something deeper, something primal that made these two terrified children understand that this man, this particular man, could actually do something. They ran. Not to the nearest table, not to the maitre d' still calling after them, but straight across the restaurant toward Sal's corner booth. Their small feet pattered against the expensive rug. They moved as one perfect unit, synchronized in their terror and their hope. Dante's hand moved inside his jacket. Rocco shifted forward, his massive frame tensing. Luca's eyes narrowed, calculating the threat level of two children in party dresses. This had never happened before. No one approached Salvatore Leone uninvited. Ever. But before anyone could react, before Sal could even process what was happening, the twins reached his booth. For small hands grabbed onto his jacket, expensive Italian wool that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and held on like it was the only solid thing left in their collapsing world. Their faces turned up toward his, those innocent blue eyes wide with desperation and tears, and something that looked terrifyingly like trust. And then they spoke, their voices breaking in overlapping harmony, each girl's words tumbling over her sister's in their desperate rush to be heard. "Please, sir," one began. "They're hurting our mother," the other continued. "She's bleeding. Please help. We don't know what to do. Please." Together, synchronized in their terror, "Please." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the kitchen sounds had stopped. Every eye in the Onyx room turned toward the corner booth. Toward Salvatore Leone, the man who'd built an empire on being untouchable, unfeeling, unmoved by any plea or threat. Toward the most feared Mafia boss in Chicago, who now sat frozen with 4 tiny hands clutching his jacket and 2 identical faces looking up at him like he was their last hope in the entire world. Waiting. Everyone waiting. To see what the monster would do when innocence itself came begging at his feet. For a moment that stretched into eternity, Sal couldn't breathe. He stared down at those two identical faces, those desperate blue eyes, and the world around him dissolved. The restaurant vanished. The silence, the staring crowd, his waiting lieutenants, all of it faded into nothing. He was 26 again, standing in the kitchen of their small apartment, watching Isabella spin toward him with joy written across every feature of her beautiful face. "Sal," she'd whispered, her hands trembling as they pressed against her still flat stomach. "It's twins." The doctor confirmed it. "We're having twin girls." He'd lifted her off her feet, spinning her around while she laughed, that sound like music he'd never heard before or since. They'd talked until dawn about names, about the life they'd build. 2 daughters. 2 perfect little girls they'd raised together, who'd never know the ugliness of his world, who'd have everything he and Isabella never had growing up. "We'll give them everything," Isabella had said, her head on his chest, her hand in his. "Love, safety, a real family. We'll build something beautiful, Sal. Despite everything, despite your business, we'll make something pure." 6 months later, she was gone. The Castellano family had wanted to send a message about territorial disputes. They didn't come for Sal directly, that would have been expected, defended against. Instead, they went after the one thing they knew would destroy him more completely than any bullet ever could. Isabella had been coming home from buying baby clothes. 2 of everything, 2 cribs, 2 matching dresses, 2 tiny pairs of shoes. The car bomb didn't discriminate. It took his wife, his unborn daughters, his entire future in one brilliant flash of fire and shattered dreams. The police asked questions they knew would never be answered. Sal had buried what was left of his family, and something inside him had died with them. The man who'd held Isabella while she laughed, who'd painted a nursery pale yellow and talked to his unborn daughters through her belly, that man was burned away in the same fire that took everything he loved. What emerged from the ashes was something harder, colder, untouchable. He'd hunted down everyone involved, made examples that became legend, built an empire on the bones of the Castellano family and anyone else who thought sentiment could be exploited. And he'd made himself one promise, carved it into his soul like commandments on stone: never let anyone close enough to be used against you. Love was weakness. Attachment was vulnerability. And vulnerability got you killed. For 25 years, those walls had held. 25 years of being alone, being feared, being untouchable. Until now. These 2 little girls clutching his jacket, their faces tilted up at him with desperate hope. They were the same age his daughters would have been when Isabella told him the news. In another life, in another world, he'd be 51 years old with 25-year-old twin daughters. Maybe they'd have Isabella's eyes. Maybe they'd have looked exactly like these 2 terrified children staring up at him now. The crack that had started when they grabbed his sleeve suddenly became a chasm. Something he'd buried so deep it should have been unreachable was clawing its way to the surface. Grief. Rage. And, underneath it all, something more dangerous than either, the ghost of the man he used to be, the father he never got to become, looking at 2 little girls who needed exactly what he'd spent 25 years refusing to be. What happened next made every man in the Onyx room question whether they were witnessing reality or hallucination. Salvatore Leone, the man who'd ordered executions over dessert, who'd broken rivals with nothing but a cold stare, who hadn't shown mercy in a quarter-century, slowly pushed back from his booth and knelt down on the expensive Persian rug. He lowered himself until he was at eye level with the 2 trembling girls, his imposing frame suddenly gentle, unthreatening. And when he spoke, his voice carried a softness that no one in that restaurant had ever heard from him. A tone that belonged to a different man, from a different lifetime. "Tell me your names, sweethearts." The twin on the left sniffled, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "I'm Gia." "I'm Chloe," said the other, her voice barely above a whisper. "We're twins," they said together, as if this explained everything. Sal nodded slowly, his dark eyes fixed on their faces with an intensity that wasn't threatening, but something else entirely. Something that looked almost like pain. Tell me what happened. Take your time. The story spilled out in overlapping sobs and hiccups, each girl finishing the other's sentences, their voices weaving together in synchronized desperation. Mama has a bakery, Gia began, her small hands still gripping Sal's jacket. She makes the most beautiful cakes, Chloe continued, tears streaming fresh down her face. Wedding cakes and birthday cakes and... 2 men came tonight, Gia interrupted herself, her voice cracking. After we closed. We were supposed to go home, but they were angry, Chloe whispered. They had tattoos. Spiders. On their necks. Sal's expression darkened almost imperceptibly, but he kept his voice gentle. What did they want? Money, Gia said. They said Mama owed them money. Protection money. But Mama said. She said she didn't have it, Chloe finished. She said she needed it for our birthday party. It's next week. We're turning 7 and Mama was saving for. They got so mad, Gia's voice dropped to a whisper, her eyes going distant. The big one, the one Mama called Nico, he pushed her. She fell and hit her head on the counter and... There was so much blood, Chloe sobbed. It was everywhere. On the floor, on the flowers, on Mama's dress. We hid behind the counter, Gia said, both girls trembling now at the memory. We held each other and stayed so quiet. The men were laughing. They broke everything. All of Mama's cakes. They called the other one Ramon. When they left, Chloe continued, we tried to wake Mama up. We shook her and called her name, but she wouldn't open her eyes. She was breathing, but it sounded wrong. Scary. We didn't know what to do, Gia said, fresh tears spilling over. We're not allowed to use the phone for emergencies without asking, but Mama couldn't tell us it was okay and... Someone told Mama once, Chloe interrupted, looking directly into Sal's eyes, that this restaurant was where the most powerful man in the city has dinner every Friday. We remembered because it's Friday and we thought maybe if he's powerful enough, maybe he could help, Gia finished. Maybe he could save Mama. The silence that followed was broken only by the twins' ragged breathing and quiet sobs. Sal remained kneeling, his jaw tight, something working behind his eyes that might have been rage or grief or both. Finally, he reached out and placed a hand on each girl's shoulder. His voice, when he spoke, carried the weight of an unbreakable vow. I'm going to help your Mama. He looked up at his consigliera without breaking contact with the girls. Luca, get the car. Now. Then, to the twins, barely above a whisper. I promise you both she's going to be okay. And Salvatore Leone never made promises he couldn't keep. The Onyx room exploded into controlled chaos. Luca already had his phone pressed to his ear, moving toward the exit. Dr. Costello. Emergency surgery, priority 1, no questions. Sweet Dreams Bakery, South Side. 5 minutes. He paused, listening. I don't care if you're at dinner. Move. Dante and Rocco were already on their feet. Sal's voice cut through the noise, quiet but absolute. 2 black vipers. Nico and Ramon. Spider tattoos on their necks. Find them. Warehouse 7. Alive. His eyes went cold as winter. I want to have a conversation about their business practices. Rocco nodded once and disappeared into the night with Dante on his heels. 3 black sedans tore through Chicago's streets minutes later, running red lights with the kind of impunity that came from owning half the city. In the lead car, Sal sat in the back seat with a twin pressed against each side of him, their small bodies trembling, their hands still clutching his now wrinkled jacket. Gia looked up at him, her voice so small it nearly broke. Is our Mama going to die? We can't lose her, Chloe whispered, her tears soaking into Sal's expensive suit. She's all we have. We don't have a daddy anymore. If Mama dies, she's not going to die. Sal's voice carried absolute certainty. He looked down at both girls, his arms naturally settling around their shoulders. I don't break my word. Ever. If I say I'm going to save her, I will. Sweet Dreams Bakery sat on a quiet corner that wasn't quiet anymore. The front window gaped open like a wound, glass glittering on the sidewalk. Inside, destruction painted a picture of casual cruelty. Display cases lay on their sides, their glass fronts shattered. A 3-tier wedding cake, someone's dream celebration, was crushed across the tile floor, white frosting mixed with glass and blood. Scattered pastries, overturned chairs, flowers from the small arrangements Sophia must have sold lying broken and trampled. And behind the counter, surrounded by the ruins of everything she'd built, Sophia Moretti lay motionless. She was younger than Sal expected, maybe mid-30s, with dark hair fanned across the tile. Blood pooled beneath her head, stark against the white floor. Her chest rose and fell in shallow, irregular gasps that sounded wrong even to Sal's untrained ear. Dr. Costello was already kneeling beside her, his medical bag open, hands moving with practiced efficiency. Severe concussion, possible skull fracture. Internal bleeding likely. He looked up at Sal, his expression grim. We need to move her now. Every second counts. The twins had frozen in the doorway, their faces gone pale as they stared at their mother lying in blood and broken cake. Sal moved between them, kneeling again so his body blocked their view. His arms came around both girls, solid and protective. Listen to me. His voice was firm but gentle. Your mama is strong. She fought to keep you safe, didn't she? She's a fighter. And Dr. Costello is the best surgeon in Chicago. I promise you both she will wake up. Paramedics loaded Sophia onto a stretcher with careful urgency. The twins climbed into the ambulance without being asked, sitting on either side of their mother's unconscious form, each holding one of her hands. Sal followed in his sedan, the convoy arriving at Chicago General within minutes. But this wasn't the emergency room. Luca had arranged access to the private wing, where foreign dignitaries and people who valued discretion received care. Within moments, Sophia was in surgery while nurses tried gently to coax the twins to a waiting area. They refused. They stood in the hallway outside the surgical suite, holding hands, waiting. When Sal approached, they moved to him instinctively, each taking one of his hands as naturally as if they'd done it 1,000 times before. They sat like that in the private waiting room, a feared crime boss with a 6-year-old girl pressed against each side, their small hands gripping his as if he were the only solid thing left in their collapsing world. Chloe whispered, her face tilted up to look at him. Are you going to be our guardian angel? Gia added, her voice carrying something like wonder through the fear. Mama always said angels come when you need them most. Before Sal could answer, his phone buzzed. A text from Rocco, just 2 words. We have them. Sal looked down at the twins, at their desperate, trusting faces, and something fundamental shifted in his chest. Something that had been frozen for 25 years began, impossibly, to thaw. Warehouse 7 sat on the industrial edge of the city, where no one asked questions and sounds didn't carry. Inside, a single bare bulb swung slowly from the ceiling, casting moving shadows across concrete walls stained with the history of other difficult conversations. 2 men sat tied to metal chairs in the center of the empty space. Nico Morales had a scarred face that spoke of a violent life, and the black spider tattoo on his neck marked him as Black Viper's muscle. Ramon Cruz sat beside him, gold teeth glinting when he licked his nervous lips, still wearing the red and black colors of his gang. Their earlier swagger, the kind that came from terrorizing shopkeepers and mothers, had evaporated completely. The heavy door opened. Footsteps echoed across concrete. Salvatore Leone entered slowly, still wearing his dinner suit, though his jacket was wrinkled from where 2 small hands had clutched it. Behind him, Dante and Rocco took positions by the exit, silent as statues. Sal's voice, when he spoke, was conversational. Almost friendly. Gentlemen, I understand you had a busy evening. Nico tried to summon defiance. Look, whoever you are, this is Black Viper's business. Angelo won't. Let me tell you about my evening, Sal interrupted, his tone still pleasant, still calm, which somehow made it more terrifying. I was having dinner. Business meeting. Nothing unusual. And then 2 6-year-old girls burst into my restaurant. He began walking in slow circles around their chairs, a predator studying prey that had already lost. Identical twins. Beautiful little girls in matching yellow dresses. Their faces were covered in tears and this pink face paint that was running down their cheeks. His voice dropped lower. Do you know what they said? Neither man answered. They're hurting our mother. Those were the exact words. For little hands grabbing at me, 2 voices crying together, begging a stranger for help because the men who were supposed to protect their neighborhood had beaten their mother unconscious. Ramon's face was slick with sweat now. We didn't know there were kids there, man. It was after closing. If you had known? Sal stopped walking. His voice dropped to something deadly quiet. You would have what, exactly? Beaten them too? Made sure there were no witnesses to your heroic victory over a single mother trying to run a bakery. He reached into his jacket and pulled out 2 small yellow ribbons, stained dark with dried blood. These are Gia and Chloe Moretti's hair ribbons. I found them at your crime scene. 6 years old. Their birthday is next week. They're turning 7. Do you know what their mother was saving money for? Silence. $150. For cupcakes, balloons, maybe a small gift each. That's what you beat her unconscious for. That's what you thought justified traumatizing 2 children for life. From his other pocket, he produced a photograph, a child's crayon drawing showing a woman surrounded by 2 stick-figure girls, hearts and flowers drawn around them in bright colors. They drew this last month for Mother's Day. Our family is written at the top. You nearly destroyed this family over the cost of birthday decorations. Sal placed the drawing on a nearby crate where both men could see it. $150, he repeated. Tell me something, who do you work for? Angelo Castellano, Nico whispered. The snake. But listen, he's the one who sets the rates, who decides. How much has your protection racket collected from that neighborhood in the past 6 months? Ramon's voice cracked. Maybe 50 grand. But we don't see most of it. It goes up the chain. $50,000 bled from families trying to make honest livings. And when one widow couldn't pay because she chose her daughter's medicine over your extortion, Sal's phone rang. He answered immediately. Yes. Dr. Costello's voice came through. Surgery went well. She's critical but stable. Another hour and we'd be having a different conversation. Those girls saved her life by getting help so fast. Sal's expression somehow got colder. He ended the call and looked at the 2 men with something approaching contempt. Sophia Moretti is going to live. Which means you 2 just graduated from murder to aggravated assault. Small consolation, but I'm sure your lawyer will appreciate the distinction. He walked toward the door, then paused and looked back. I want you to think about something while you wait. Think about 2 little girls who will have nightmares for years because of your business. About a woman who'll never feel completely safe in her own bakery again. About the fact that you terrorized children over birthday money. His voice dropped to a whisper that carried more threat than any shout. And then I want you to think very carefully about what kind of men you'll be if you survive what comes next. The door closed behind him with a hollow clang, leaving Nico and Ramon alone with their fear and a child's drawing that accused them more powerfully than any words ever could. The abandoned meatpacking plant smelled of rust and old death, the kind of place where bad decisions came to their logical conclusions. At 3 a.m., it was all hanging chains and shadows, industrial decay mixed with something darker, the residue of violence that never quite washes away. 3 black sedans pulled up in formation, and Sal stepped out first, flanked by Luca, Dante, and Rocco. The sound of his footsteps echoed through the cavernous space like a judge entering court. Angelo, the snake, Castellano waited with 8 of his crew, trying to look dangerous in expensive knockoff clothes that screamed overcompensation. He was mid-30s, all swagger and no substance, the kind of man who confused cruelty with strength. His voice fidgeted when Sal approached, their nerves showing despite their attempts at hardness. "Salvatore Leone," Angelo called out, forcing confidence into his voice. "This is unexpected. I thought you stayed out of street-level operations these days." Sal said nothing. He just walked forward slowly, studying Angelo the way an entomologist might examine an insect pinned to a board. The silence stretched until it became uncomfortable, then unbearable. Finally, Sal spoke. "Street-level operations," he repeated, his voice soft and cold. "Is that what you call terrorizing mothers and orphaning children?" Angelo shifted his weight, trying to maintain his swagger. "Business is business, Leone. Sometimes examples must be made. Your generation understood that." "My generation," Sal said, even softer now, the kind of quiet that made smart men run, understood there were lines you don't cross. Women, children, families. Those were sacred, even in our world. He stepped closer. Angelo instinctively backed away despite being surrounded by his own men. Sal pulled out the twins' drawing, the family portrait with hearts and flowers, and held it up like evidence at a trial. "Let me tell you about Sacred, Castellano. Tonight, 2 identical 6-year-old girls walked 12 blocks through your territory. Alone. In the dark. Crying. Terrified. Looking for help because your animals beat their mother unconscious." He paused, letting that sink in. "Gia and Chloe Moretti. They drew this picture last month for Mother's Day. Their mama has it hanging in her bakery. They wanted me to keep it safe while she's in the hospital." Angelo tried to deflect, waving a hand dismissively. "Look, Nico and Ramon got carried away. The woman was behind 3 months." "The woman," Sal interrupted, his voice building with controlled fury, "is Sofia Moretti, 34 years old. Widowed 3 years ago when her husband died in a construction accident. She works 16-hour days making wedding cakes for celebrations she'll never afford, birthday treats for children who remind her of her own daughters, funeral flowers for the dead she envies." He held up 3 fingers. 3 months behind. $150 total. That's what you thought justified beating her unconscious in front of her children. $5 a day she couldn't afford to give you. The plant fell silent except for water dripping somewhere in the darkness. "She was behind on your blood money," Sal continued, "because she spent her savings on medicine when Gia had scarlet fever last winter. She chose her daughter's life over your protection racket." He placed the drawing on a rusted metal table where everyone could see the crayon hearts and stick figures. "This is what courage looks like. 2 little girls refusing to give up on the person they love most. Running through the most dangerous streets in Chicago to find someone powerful enough to help." His eyes locked on Angelo's. "They found me, Castellano. They burst into my restaurant during business hours and grabbed my jacket with their tiny hands." For hands. 2 voices. Both saying the same thing. "Please help our mother." Sal's tone shifted from philosophical to purely business. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to liquidate your entire protection operation in the Moretti neighborhood. Tonight." Angelo's bravado flared. "You can't just. Every payment, every debt, every outstanding balance, it all disappears," Sal continued as if Angelo hadn't spoken. "You're going to calculate every dollar you've collected from that neighborhood in the past year. Every single cent. And you're going to return it. That's over 50 grand. We don't have. Then liquidate everything," Sal said with finality. "Your cars, your jewelry, your stake in this filthy operation. Rob your own dealers. I don't care. But every shop owner, every family, every person you've been bleeding gets their money back. In cash. By Monday." He walked forward until he was standing directly in front of Angelo, close enough that his presence felt suffocating. "And if I hear about any Black Viper operating within 20 blocks of a school, a bakery, or any family business ever again, if so much as one of your boys jaywalks in a residential neighborhood, I will personally introduce you to consequences your street education never prepared you for." Angelo's mask finally cracked. "You're making a mistake protecting Sal's hand shot out, grabbing Angelo by the throat and lifting slightly. Those girls are 6 years old. 6. They should be playing with dolls and learning to read, not running through the streets at night looking for someone to save their dying mother. He released Angelo, who gasped for air and stumbled backward. The mistake was yours, Sal said quietly. You forgot that power isn't about who you can hurt. It's about who you choose to protect. Something shifted inside him as he spoke those words. He wasn't doing this for territory or reputation. He was fighting for the family Isabella would have wanted him to protect. He was fighting for the daughters they never got to raise. He was fighting because Gia and Chloe had shown him something he'd thought was dead, that his heart was still there, just buried under 25 years of grief. Consider this your only warning, Castellano, Sal said, turning toward the exit. The black vipers are extinct in family neighborhoods. Officially. Tonight. He walked away, his men following in formation. Behind him, Angelo collapsed against the wall, finally understanding he'd touched something sacred in a world where nothing was supposed to be sacred anymore. The drawing remained on the table, a testament to the courage of 2 little girls who'd saved more than just their mother tonight. News spread through Chicago's underworld like wildfire. Sal Leone had personally involved himself in a street-level dispute. Unprecedented. Unthinkable. The whispers grew into legend within hours. 2 little girls in matching yellow dresses had changed the most dangerous man in the city. They'd walked into his restaurant, grabbed his jacket with their tiny hands, and asked him to save their mother. And he had. Within 72 hours, the Black Vipers had completely withdrawn from residential areas. Over $53,000 flowed back to neighborhood businesses, delivered in unmarked envelopes by men who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Angelo Castellano's operation dismantled itself, his crew scattered like roaches when the lights come on, his influence evaporating as if it had never existed. Sophia's bakery repair bills were mysteriously paid in full by an anonymous benefactor. Nico and Ramon were discovered by police with full confessions already written, their hands shaking as they signed. They'd spend years in prison, which was mercy compared to what could have happened. Sal visited Sophia's hospital room daily while she recovered. The twins never left her side, but they also waited for Mr. Sal every evening, their faces lighting up when they heard his footsteps in the corridor. A routine developed. He brought flowers, sat between the girls in the chair next to Sophia's bed, and listened to their stories about Mama waking up soon. They'd lean against him on either side, small and warm and trusting in a way that made his chest ache. You kept your promise, Gia said one evening, her voice serious beyond her years. You saved her. Are you going to keep visiting? Chloe asked, looking up at him with those heartbreaking eyes. After Mama gets better? The answer surprised even himself. If you'll have me, I'll be here every Friday. Throughout the neighborhood, Sal quietly stationed men, not as enforcers, but as guardians. Crime in the 20-block radius dropped to 0. Shop owners slept peacefully for the first time in years. Mothers walked their children to school without fear. The protection wasn't a racket anymore, it was real. When Sophia finally woke, the reunion was everything a hospital room should witness. Tears and laughter, and 2 little girls trying to climb into bed with their mother all at once. They told her everything, their words tumbling over each other in excitement. We found the most powerful man in Chicago, Mama, Gia said. And he saved you because we asked him to, Chloe finished. Sophia's eyes found Sal standing in the doorway, holding back to give them their moment. Her tears came fresh as she reached out a hand toward him. How can I ever thank you? Sal stepped forward, taking her hand gently. You already have, he said quietly. By raising 2 of the bravest girls I've ever met. He realized something in that moment, standing in the antiseptic brightness of the hospital room with the twins pressed against his sides and their mother looking at him with gratitude he didn't deserve. He wasn't operating as a crime boss in this situation. He was acting as protector, guardian, father figure. The role he was supposed to play 25 years ago, before God took Isabella and the baby and left him with nothing but an empire built on other people's fear. Justice had been served, but not through police or courts. Through the kind of power that makes real change, the power to choose protection over profit, courage over cruelty, family over fear. The twins had reminded him that power without purpose was just violence. But power with purpose? That could save lives. That could redeem even the darkest soul. Gia tugged on his sleeve. Mr. Sell? Will you come to Mama's bakery when she goes home? She makes the best cannoli in Chicago. He looked down at her earnest face, then at Chloe nodding agreement, then at Sophia smiling through her tears. For the first time in 25 years, Sal Leone felt something he'd thought was dead forever. He felt like maybe, just maybe, he could be good again. I wouldn't miss it, he said. 6 months later, Sweet Dreams Bakery had been completely transformed. New storefront, repaired windows, an expanded kitchen that smelled perpetually of vanilla and fresh bread. Behind the building, a small garden area now existed, a play space for Gia and Chloe with flower beds they tended themselves. Business was thriving. Sophia's reputation for quality brought customers from across the city, people who'd heard about the widow who made the best wedding cakes in Chicago and stayed for the cannoli that tasted like heaven. Every Friday evening at 6 o'clock, Sal arrived without fail. Same table by the window, same order, coffee and whatever pastry the twins recommended that week. He'd sit with Gia on his left and Chloe on his right, arms around both of them while they told him about school and friends and their week's adventures. He listened with genuine interest, helped with homework, gave advice about playground disputes. Sophia would join them after closing, and they'd become something unexpected, an unconventional family held together by courage and second chances. The neighborhood had transformed too. The Black Vipers were completely gone. Legends said they disbanded after the twins incident, the night 2 little girls changed Chicago's underworld. Other gangs wouldn't touch the area. It was known as Leone's Protected Zone, the safest 20 blocks in the city, all because 2 children had asked for help and someone powerful enough to give it had said yes. The twins' 7th birthday party was a major celebration. The bakery filled with friends, classmates, and teachers. A massive cake with 7 candles sat on the center table, surrounded by presents piled high. Among them were matching lockets from Mr. Sal, each containing a picture of Isabella. Your guardian angel, he told them softly, fastening the chains around their necks. When they blew out the candles, both girls closed their eyes tight. Later, they told him in unison, "We wished for you to always be our family." Sal's throat closed. This was the birthday party he would have thrown for his own twins. These were the moments stolen from him 25 years ago, given back by 2 little girls who'd refused to give up on anything, not their mother, not themselves, not even a dangerous old man with a dead heart. Sophia pulled him aside after the cake was cut. "You saved more than just my life that night," she said quietly. "You gave my daughters back their sense of safety, their belief that good people exist." She paused, studying his face. "But I think, maybe they saved you too?" Sal's admission came easier than he expected. "I was dead inside for 25 years. Your girls reminded me what it feels like to be alive." Later, as he tucked the twins into bed in the apartment above the bakery, Gia looked up at him with those serious eyes. "Mama thinks we saved you by finding you that night. But we know the truth," Chloe added from her matching bed. Together, they said, "You saved yourself by choosing to help us." Sal sat there between them, holding their small hands. "Maybe," he said softly, "we all saved each other." The next morning, Sal visited Isabella's grave for the first time in years. He brought roses, Sophia's favorite flower from the bakery, and knelt in the grass that had grown over the plot where his wife and unborn child rested. "Isabella," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I want you to meet our daughters. Their names are Gia and Chloe. They found me when I was lost. They reminded me of the father I was supposed to be. He placed the roses against the headstone. I know they're not ours by blood, but they chose me, and I'm choosing them. Every day, the way we would have chosen our girls. The wind moved through the cemetery trees, gentle and warm. Sal could almost feel Isabella's presence, could almost hear her voice telling him what he already knew in his heart. I think you sent them to me, he whispered. 2 little angels in matching yellow dresses. I think you knew it was time for me to stop grieving and start living again. He stood, brushing grass from his knees. In the distance, church bells rang. Friday evening, time for dinner at Sweet Dreams Bakery. Luca waited by the car, patient as always. Sal walked toward it, his steps lighter than they'd been in 25 years. They said Salvatore Leone was the most dangerous man in Chicago. That he had no heart, no mercy, no weakness. But 2 6-year-old girls proved them all wrong. They showed him that the strongest men aren't the ones who never break, they're the ones who choose to heal. Sometimes the smallest voices crying out together can change everything. Sometimes 4 little hands can grab hold of the hardest heart and refuse to let go until it remembers how to love. And sometimes, the family you lose can be found again in the most unexpected places, if you're brave enough to open the door when innocence comes knocking. What would you do if innocence came knocking at your door? This story reminds us that redemption is always possible, that the smallest acts of courage can change the hardest hearts, and that family isn't always defined by blood, sometimes it's defined by choice. If this story moved you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more powerful stories about redemption, courage, and second chances. Your support helps us continue sharing tales that remind us of our shared humanity. Have you ever been changed by an unexpected encounter? Have you ever been someone's Mr. Sal, or had someone be yours? ***, share your story in the comments below. Sometimes our own experiences of courage, redemption, and chosen family need to be told too. And if you're facing your own dark chapter, remember, healing begins the moment you choose it. Just like Sal. Just like Gia and Chloe. Just like all of us who've learned that the strongest thing we can do is allow ourselves to love again. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a story that might change your perspective or even change your life. Because sometimes, the greatest power isn't in being feared, it's in being brave enough to care.